And also, I am told he was described as just sort of stone cold throughout and emotionless throughout the entire process.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Isn't it time that we took a long, hard look into the killer's eyes? Yes, it's not very scientific, but I think it's important that we do ask a seemingly superficial question. What does this killer look like? And so it's quite a simple exercise. We examine a number of photos of the face of Brian Kohberger. Now you may remember I made a video of the course of the investigation asking precisely this. What does he look like? And it so often happens that we're surprised. Well, what were we expecting? A handsome muscle-bound Hulk or a thin, weaselly, nervy Mr. Ordinary? Now, one thing I have noticed is there's a rush of experts, profilers, people sort of queuing up to provide their expert profile. We've only known this guy for one day, and you want to profile him. So really what we need to do is take a step back. A lot of information is coming from all sorts of quarters, classmates, friends, family members. Collate all of that. At least first absorb that information, and then gradually begin to start nailing your psychological colors to the mast, right? So that is what we're going to do. And I am going to follow up this particular analysis with another analysis where we start to do that. We start to collate all of these comments from various quarters and start to get to know this person, not through our assessments, but through what a lot of other people have said about him, and then slowly start deciding, narrowing down, diagnosing, assessing, deciding who this guy is, and possibly what is wrong with his psychology. Before we get to this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Thank you to the hundreds, really the thousands of you who have subscribed in the last couple of days. Welcome to the channel. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. Now, at the end of the Banfield clip, Brian Enton reveals that Kohberger, when taken into custody, was stone cold and emotionless. Now, you take that and you start asking the question, is that something that was just in the idiosyncratic scenario of being arrested? You could imagine a lot of people being cold and emotionless. Maybe they're shocked. Or is that the sign of a more generalized effect that this guy had just in general? Someone who didn't seem emotionally in touch with himself or with other people. Someone who seemed to have a flat affect in general. Otherwise, why bring that up? Now, as I say, that may seem par for the course. Think of how stone cold and emotionless Chris Watts appeared after his arrest. But it goes further than that. When Kohberger graduated, the dude graduating him smiles and Kohberger remains deadpan. We've got video of that. So already we have a second instance. Now, intuitively going into this crime, I thought, is this just about love or is it about something more? Is it about how someone else reflects on the killer's life? And then because he's not accepted, he thinks about everything in a more agitated, perhaps political way, perhaps even philosophical way. In other words, it may start with love and rejection, but then it becomes something that is politicized and weaponized in his criminal mind. But what is that exactly? Well, we are starting to get a few little flags coming through, crimson red flags. Kohberger's fixation with the moral code for eating may have come by his anchoring to some other moral code, perhaps Catholicism. And we know that he attended the DeSales University, and in fact he studied there until, I think, June this year. Now, if you think about it, and this is something one of my patrons actually said, if you think about it, he finishes his graduate program in Pennsylvania just this past June. And then he was only in the Washington, Idaho area for a few months. Thanks a lot for that, Erica. And then she said, I wonder if he attended a party at their house somewhere around that time, in the sort of summer of this year, 2022, and felt unwelcome. Maybe only B and D were nice to him, and hence that was the result. But what was the source of this rigid thinking, this rigid personality, this rigid person? Could it have been the rural community in Pennsylvania, a particularly rural part of that community? Could it be going to a particular university, DeSales, which is a private Catholic university? And could it be a particular personality within that environment that sort of crystallizes, that sort of hardens instead of softens, that takes a line that becomes more rigid, more inflexible, rather than softer when it comes to contact with the real world? Now, it is unclear to what extent Koberger was a practicing Catholic or to what extent his parents were, but whether he was or wasn't, we can clearly intuit a conflicted individual where there is a schism between physical and mental health, veganism, and an obsessive, fixated, frustrated, and aggressive killer. Just think about this idea of, at one point I actually thought the killer might have worked at a butchery, and here you have someone who's actually a vegan, who doesn't want to touch meat. That is a contradiction. And perhaps something else, drugs or some other fixation. The bottom line is you don't seem to be dealing with a sunny, happy, smiley individual. You don't seem to be dealing with faces like these. Instead, you have this face. And take a look at those eyes, troubled, hooded, haunted, cynical and contemptuous, a crooked nose set in a too polished face, and a face that cannot smile. Have a look at his graduation photo. Probably because there wasn't that much to smile about in his world and in his worldview. And so, do you see it written all over their faces? This idea that someone's fairy tale was someone else's nightmare. Just in that, look at the faces and you see a fairy tale. And someone else is looking in on that. And this is his nightmare. But don't worry, he's got a solution to it. But let's slow down a tad and just ask a few simple questions. Now that we know, we're starting to get an idea who this is. How is this a nightmare for him? Well, it's quite simple. They're happy, I'm not. They're having fun, I'm not. And you can see it because he's not smiling. He's not happy. He's not in a big group having a great time, going on to a wonderful future. They're going on to a happily ever after graduation. He's going home to this. I don't know if this was just someone rejecting someone else. I get the idea it was also someone of a particular status and station revealing someone else's lowly status and prospects. Can you see it's not just a person rejecting another person, it's actually one life and lifestyle and life psychology potentially invalidating another one. That is far more humiliating. Once again, we do have to ask, if this was a targeted attack, who was targeted? And in the next episode, we're going to look at some intel on that aspect. I have had an idea it was Madison, right? But it looks like it might be somebody else. But I want to leave you with a particularly chilling thought. Can you imagine someone else was the target, not Madison, someone else? And Madison is lying next to Kaylee, right? And Kaylee is the primary victim. And Madison is kind of waiting her turn. She's trying to rouse herself. Can't quite make out what is happening. She's sort of woozy. And there's a moment where this person, you can see his face, enters through the doorway. It's somewhat dark, but you can actually make out the sheen on his face. Can you imagine actually seeing him? Seeing this face in the dark and then feeling hard thuds coming out of nowhere. It's a surprise, it's a shock on your torso, followed by sharp, piercing pain. I suppose the killer in his own sick psychology thought this was settling some sort of score, that what he was doing was only fair in some twisted psychology. Someone has called this that he was trying to exert his own kind of justice. I don't think he was thinking about this as justice in a larger framework. I think he was trying to settle a score in terms of his own psychology. But can you imagine being in this bedroom, decorated in a theme of fairy tale sweet princesses, all of this softness, when a shadowy figure steps inside and he brings with him all of that hardness, all of those burdens, all of those sharp edges? When they saw his face, was it a face they recognized? Were their faces he knew? So we will scratch even deeper into the who in the next episode. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.